Hello, and welcome to the Physical Therapy Owners Club podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Shields. Today is a special day because we're doing something completely different. And thanks to my friend, James Savas, for recommending it. We're doing a roundtable today. If you are a PT owner anywhere across the country in Canada, more than likely you need a physical therapist. Inevitably, as I ask people who needs a physical therapist, everyone raised their hands, right? And so I've asked the question even on the Facebook group, but thanks to the wisdom of James, he reckoned that maybe we do a roundtable of some PT recruiting experts and talk about what it takes to get a physical therapist nowadays. How do we stand out? Why we're in this situation? I mean, I've got a number of pre-scripted questions that I'll ask you guys. But first, I want to say thank you, James, Brian, and Will, for joining us today. I've got James, who is an HR professional, currently deputy CEO at Hands On Diagnostics, has a ton of HR experience, including recruiting. Brian Weidner of founder and CEO of CareerTree Network, who solely does PT. Well, not solely, right? 85% of recruiting, mostly PT recruiting. And then Will Humphreys, recruiter extraordinaire, co-founder and CEO of In the Black. Did I get that right, Will?
Bingo, you nailed it.
Awesome, right. And he has a ton of experience in recruiting successfully as well. So first of all, thank you guys for joining me today.
Thank you.
Well, let's start really quickly. Unless the audience wants to learn more about you guys, I'm gonna forego the typical introductions, like who you are and where you come from and why you're so important and why you're such an amazing recruiter. And kind of get straight into get into the questions. Let's start getting into some things. And if you want to add to this, and like I said, the guests here or the experts here on the panel are following along with Facebook so you can ask questions. So if there's people who have some questions as we do this, raise your hands. But first question I want to ask you guys, and I'll start with you, Brian, because you are doing this full time, right? Why are we in this state of everyone needing a physical therapist? I mean, it didn't seem so needy 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. Maybe I'm mistaken, but it seems like there's just a huge demand for physical therapists. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I think that's a great place to start. I mean, I think on some level, PTs have always been in high demand. But historically, you can post a job online and then you get some responses. So the demand wasn't really as apparent, but, lately a lot of clinics, they're posting their job on Indeed, basically. And then, they're not seeing any candidates responding. And, I think my own personal theory is, like a lot of people after kind of in the midst of COVID, they decided to retire early. So we had a lot of people that were like, hey, this is a good time for me to just do like an early retirement. And, but we, also during COVID, we kind of went through something together where a lot of people came out on the other side and they're like, well, maybe I don't want to do this anymore. Maybe I want to go somewhere else, or maybe my employer didn't treat me very well when they had to furlough me during the COVID situation. So, kind of reevaluating, what I want to do. We see in the news like the Great Reset or the Great Resignation,
right?
And people, leaving their jobs, and where are they going is really the question. But I don't think they're all going back to full time. I think a lot of people are kind of reevaluating what they're doing and, kind of deciding all over again, why am I working? What am I hoping to gain from being employed as a PT?
Yeah. What do you guys want? Do you have anything to add to that, Will or James? What do you guys think?
Yeah, James, why don't you go first? But
sure. Yeah, I think a lot of it is the psychology of it, right? We went through what we all went through in the last 2 years, and I know maybe about a dozen PTs in total. This is across the nation, different areas. Many of them happen to be in the rural areas, but they were from other cities, went to a new location, They were recruited, 2-3 years ago with this expectation that's going to go great. COVID happened. They, probably frankly got a little bit nervous, wanted to be back near home. The job became less important. Family was more important. I mean, I have 2 friends that was exactly their reasoning for moving back to New York when they were out in Southern California and I think it was Oregon, because they wanted to be near family and just, the psychology of the situation we all went through, like you said, Ryan. I think that's a big part of it. Yeah, that's one thing I can add in. I don't think, I think also that, when you're knocked down really hard, and we all were to some degree, we went through our version of that. I think it takes a lot to get back up and get back to normal. It's a funny word, I know, the new normal, that phrase. But I think when you were upset with what was going on, you had some personal issues, you wanted to get back in your home, you don't want to work. And I think you're right, Brian. I have 3 other friends that stopped being PTs. One became a nurse. So I think there was a shift too in what they wanted to do. Like, forget
Sure.
it. I don't want to, maybe it was because of COVID. I don't want to deal with patients. I don't have the exact reasoning, but
Mhm.
they shifted professions to some degree. So that's my little version of that.
Yeah. Do you want to add anything to that, Will?
Yeah, I love all that they've said, and I agree with it. I think, as we look at the facts of how our economy was doing, the physical therapy industry economy of supply and demand for therapists, it was already deficient. People were struggling. Most PTs prior to COVID absolutely said that was their biggest barrier for growth, was finding and retaining talent physical therapists.
Mhm.
And so when that outpouring occurred, it was a good thing for owners for a little while because it flooded. I remember coaching companies during that time frame. They were getting rid of relationships that were no longer as aligned. So I'm not saying good or bad employees, because that's not what it's about, right? They were finding these individuals that they've struggled with, and either they weren't the leader they needed to be to handle it, or the employee, the therapist, wasn't a good fit. And either way, they didn't know how to deal with it. So when COVID caused this shrinking across our industry there was already a hiring deficit, it flooded our industry. And so for a 6-month period, people were like letting go of people and seeing their numbers rise. Culture was improving. But now we're in that stage where there's this huge vacuum. We're trying to get all the PTs back in because people are returning to their normal production, and we're not there yet. So as PTs, for all the reasons that Brian and James just mentioned, in addition to the fact that when PTs are finding their jobs, they're way less likely to move because maybe they were laid off or they saw someone laid off. So there's a lot less movement within the fewer numbers to be, of physical therapists. There's fewer who are willing to move of that remaining group, and it's smaller. And then we can't negate the last thing, which is our industry, according to forecasts for physical therapy, we have the highest growth rate, one of the highest in any industry, but the highest in healthcare. We have the highest growth rate of any other profession in healthcare. So there's all that gap, that ravine between supply and demand was already going to widen. And then COVID came and created this vacuum, and it results in the psychology of it, like they mentioned, in addition to this really overly skewed perspective of who's available.
And to piggyback off of this question and your answers, as you're working with some of these physical therapists yourself, Will, and helping some of the companies hire physical therapists, what's the difference between what PTs are looking for now versus 2 years ago? Is there a difference? I mean, are they looking for something different in their job?
Their subjective reports might indicate so, but truly, in my opinion, I don't think it is different. I think there might be, we can't suppose that like they're not looking for more stability given this climate of change. And they might be a little bit pickier, like James and Brian were talking about, in terms of how they were treated versus how they want to be treated. But it all boils down to the same thing that we all want. We want to work at a place that we love, where we feel seen and heard and appreciated. So for companies that are successful now, the ones who are able to recruit, and there's very few of them, but I coach with some of them who are finding their voice in the sea of PT companies that are wanting to recruit. Those are the ones who have clearly defined purpose, vision, values. Those are the ones who, when they finally get the interview, it makes it so much easier for that PT to say yes.
And what do you say to that, Brian? Are you noticing some of some of the difference in expectations amongst the people who are looking for jobs? I mean, there are not many that are out there looking for jobs, but amongst the PT population themselves, are they looking for something different nowadays compared to a few years ago?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think, really what they're looking for is the rewards of joining the team. So, and that's translated often into like flexibility. I think that's one thing that really came up recently, but
Okay.
rather than just having that default mentality, it's thinking about, okay, what is this employer going to give me in terms of, is it a practice setting that is, of interest to me? Is the clinic hours, is that conducive to my family life? So it's a lot more selfish in terms of the motivation that the PT has, which I don't think, we hear selfish, and I think a lot of people get turned off by that, but it's really just like the reality of the situation. Like, is this job going to match up with exactly what I want? Because there's so many jobs out there that I no longer have to settle for something. Oh, my child has soccer, I guess I'll just miss some of the games. Well, now it's like, well, what if I found a job that the clinic closed at 5:30 in the evening? I wouldn't have to work evenings. And in the past, I think there was more like flexibility among PTs in terms of, being willing to cover. But now I'm definitely seeing more like individualistic, making sure that my needs are met.
Yeah.
And again, if they're not, I have multiple options.
Right. And James, like, if you're going to attract one of these people, that they have so many options. Will spoke to it a little bit already about really having clearly defined purpose, vision, and values. What's one successful action that owners need to do in order to attract just some resumes? How do we get them to answer the ads, or what is one successful action that you can recommend?
One. Okay, one.
Well, because there's three of us here, so you got to give the other guys a chance.
No, of course. I mean, Will's comment is like spot on. Obviously, if the owner knows what his purpose, vision, and values are, then you sell the PT on that, and if he's on with you, right? So that's an awesome point. And that's really what it's about. I would encourage an owner to not get reasonable on what he needs and wants, and I see that a lot, because I think Brian's partially correct that, and I've seen that people are getting, well, I'd rather just be home. I can't work on Saturdays anymore. I have kids. Well, you had kids before, but now your priority shifted, baby. And that's my pocket in New York. I've seen that. So yeah, I think the owner needs to stick to their guns, and I mean, well, that's one thing, is the owner sticking to their guns on what they value and pulling in someone that they want, not getting reasonable or slowing down about what they really need to have there. And that's all. That's one point.
Well, I think there's an opportunity there to, like you say, stick to your guns and uphold your values, and still provide some flexibility that maybe you weren't providing in the past. That, like, to Brian's point, like, owners might need to find some flexibility that still lies within their practice and how they do things, and their values and their purpose. Can their purpose and value still be met in a different scenario, right? And have some flexibility
kind of
within
compromise. Right.
Yeah. Can they compromise? Yeah. Like, if I turned it back to you, Will, if I asked the same question, I have a pretty good feeling you would say the same thing. Like, what's one successful action? So say someone does have clearly defined purpose, vision, and values. What's one successful action now that they can take to find a recruit and to stand out amongst the others?
It goes down to lead generation. So if you're listening to this and all you're doing is you have your Indeed ad, you're not going to get results. Like, maybe if you consider what you had before COVID results, you're not going to even get those results post-COVID. That's why great guys like Brian, I recommend clearly, and I get nothing from promoting the other panelists in this, but Brian does a fantastic job. Yeah, he does a fantastic job of creating leads. So his company does that. If you're trying to do that internally, what I tell people is to stop hunting and start gathering. So for example, if we have clearly defined purpose, vision, values, I would say even people who don't have that clearly defined, most PT owners I work with are really good at selling their practice, because it's not like I guess we don't use the word sell in medical businesses, do we? But it's like enrolling physical therapists into their companies because they ultimately are really passionate and they can sell the sizzle and the steak at the same time, and people jump on board with them. But what they suck at is that they really stink at like standing out in this like lead generation space. And so you can work, and it's because it's a whole different training. It took me a long time working with professionals out of physical therapy to learn what I've learned, and Brian as well. That's what Brian brings to the table. He has physical therapy in his home. Your wife is a physical therapist, right, Brian?
Yep, that's right. Yep.
And so he has the recruiting background, plus he gets the industry. And so if you're trying to do this internally, what I'd say is to stop hunting and start gathering. What does that mean? Well, hunting is like your Indeed ad. Gathering is going to where your PTs, your ideal physical therapists, your A players are already congregating, and make yourself known. If it's an online group, where you can see where they're gathering, you go into there, you make yourself known, you answer questions. And the thing that people forget is that lead generation and recruiting isn't a cyclic effort, it's a daily effort. And so I advise my clients to do 5 hours a week on top of their already insane schedule. I know, and that's why you need to hire coaches like Nathan Shields, because he'll do a yearly strategic plan with you and help you map out your year and build that in as a priority. Because at the end of the day, if you had a bench of A players willing and wanting to join your company at any given moment, we've been able to experience that, then all of a sudden there's time to do whatever else we want. So this is top priority. If you're listening to this podcast, you got to start building time in every day. You want to go to these watering holes where these PTs are already gathering. Many of them are online. Many of them are in your student SIGs or in your university campuses. And you just start reaching out to professionals like the people in this room to find out how you should interact with them in a way that produces results. So it's a long answer for a simple question. What's the one thing? If they've got their purpose, vision, values, the simple answer is upgrade their lead generation performance.
Yeah, and I love that you said that you have to take the time to do that, because I think the default for physical therapist owners in the past has been that we place the ad and we wait when we need somebody. The next step was to always have an ad out, right? That's where we got to, and we were always recruiting, right? Well, now you got to take another step. You can't just have the ad and leave it out there, even if you're not necessarily hiring a PT. You've got to actually start doing some active recruiting and take some of the work on yourself. Brian, what do you want to add to that? Will covered a ton, as did James, but I don't want to leave you out of this question.
Yeah.
What one successful action can owners do to start gathering some of these resumes and collecting options?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think it's really a mindset shift at a high level. So earlier, Nathan, you said like answering ads, and that's great. If a person applies for the job, certainly we want to jump on it right away and get back to them. But it's more about now with the current market, shifting the mindset and being vulnerable and going out and talking to people like Will mentioned. But it's more about, instead of talking generally, I think it's more about being vulnerable about, would you like to come join our team? So the person hasn't expressed any interest. You're on LinkedIn and you saw their profile, or you saw them on Facebook, or you met them at a conference or whatever. And it's more about, would you be interested to explore joining us? And that's a difficult conversation to have because it involves a lot of rejection. It involves a lot of the clinic owner like giving up their control to do like the interview process, because, to a certain extent, we're going out and we're, initiating that conversation. Obviously, you still want to screen candidates after they've demonstrated some interest, but just getting vulnerable around, okay, who do I know or who do I see online that I can maybe reach out to? And then, having those conversations. But the challenging part is, there's a lot of rejection to it. But B, I think the most important shift is like the person is not applying for your job. So they don't have any interest or knowledge about your practice. Like they're just out there. They're relatively happy in their current position. You know, they have a profile on LinkedIn. But now as the clinic owner, you want to go out and identify that talent and contact them proactively. And being open to do that, I think, is really huge. And that's where you get a lot of good, results, because most PTs, they're not actively checking Indeed. Like they're going home, they're going to, taking their kids to school, like they're just going about their day. So if you're going to wait to have your job ad deliver you candidates, I think that's really short-sighted.
Yeah, I love that you brought up LinkedIn, because the cool thing about LinkedIn is that if you do send, I mean, you can find certain physical therapists in your demographic, and you can filter those out and find them. But when you do message them on LinkedIn, that could be tied to their email, and they're like, oh, I got a message from LinkedIn. I wonder what this is about. And so I think that goes to what Will's point was, is that you have to be actively involved and engaged in this, right?
Right.
What more do you want to add to something like that, James? Do any thoughts come to mind?
Well, one tool, and Will's spot on with having to expand how you're finding people and where you're looking for people. One thing I had have to this day a lot of success with is I will milk my current staff for prospects. And that, I mean, I actually ran a little tiny story. I ran like for a year, this is years ago though. I ran a little program for myself just to challenge myself. And I put no ads out on Indeed, or back then, whatever else was out there now, I forget.
Craigslist or something.
Yeah, monster.com. I think I was using
Monster,
that back then.
yeah.
And I said, let's stop it. Let's just but like heavy promotion internally, like a weekly email from the boss. Hey, what's going on? Who do you know? Give me a name. Give me a name. Give me a name. In staff meetings. Okay, guys, we need to, we're opening up this new clinic, or we need somebody. Who do you know? Because I don't know, 9 out of 10 times there's a guy or gal that on your list, on your Facebook page, in your phone, that you went to school with, like you said, Will, that's in one of your groups, and one of your 6, and you're not thinking with them as a candidate. And I would always get, well, but they're already working. And like you said, I think it was Brian or Nathan. Well, okay, fine. So see if they want something else. And back in that, and when I ran that, I had about an 85% retention rate on the people that came in that way, like far above any other way, retention rate from any other method of recruiting. So milking the heck out of your other owners, your co-owners, your buddies, the competitors. If you have a good rapport, if you have a good rapport, of course, hey, anyone, if they let somebody go, it doesn't mean that game is off, right? Maybe they're the perfect fit for you. So I would just, Will alluded to this, but I would look in all these little cracks and crevices, especially with the staff, the good staff.
Yeah, where you brought it up, Will, where are some of those watering holes that you've either seen some success or recommend people go to?
Yeah, so LinkedIn is a big one. What I'll tell you is the younger, this is my personal opinion for what it's worth. I have found with my clients, helping them find PTs, they've had a lot more success at the younger PT watering holes. And I mean younger, meaning in the stage of career, not actual physical age, because when people are first coming out of school, or they've been out for a couple of years, especially if they are actually younger, they're in a little bit more transition period of life. So they don't have their kids in school and have grandparents nearby. There's no world where those people are going to leave unless it's something more severe, versus someone who's, in no kids and all these different things. And that's, again, that could just be my opinion, but what I have had the most success in personally and in coaching is where those younger watering holes are. So LinkedIn is actually more where they live. There's also some Facebook groups that are really big. You can search for those, but the number one watering hole is always the university system. That is where, in our experience, Nathan, we were able to build that bench. And then later, when it became Empower Physical Therapy, and I was over those 26 locations and responsible for hiring all the PTs, the reason we never had an open position for long was because I owned a relationship with each of the universities in a way that's different. Again, you might be taking students from a local university. You might even be attending the job fairs, but how much do they see you as the guru of business? Like, there's so much that they're afraid of in that stage of life, and they're the most passionate. They're driven by this desire to become a physical therapist. They're paying money to become it. So they're really looking for these value adds. And so what we used to do was to create a relationship where we speak regularly on a semi-annual basis. I still do it even though I'm not necessarily hiring specifically, but you go speak at these things as the physical therapist in private practice who's going to train you on how to find your ideal dream job. And you get in touch in relationships with these class presidents. And really, once that happens, you get into a cycle. It's a momentum that starts pushing you forward. And it gets to a place where they start asking you to speak at the student conclaves and enclaves. I don't even know what that word is. Conclave, enclave. Enclave is a Buick. The Buick Enclave. I figured it out. Enclave. But yeah, so like the whole thing is that like they know you. And like, you know, for me, one of my big tricks was, it's not a trick, sorry. One of my calls to action was that after I would speak about helping you find your dream job, I'd say, hey guys, I'm happy to do a free job interview for all of you who want to get some practice of doing your job interviews, whether or not you want to work for me or not. Right. And what I'm going to do is we're going to do a 20-minute interview and a 10-minute feedback session. And what I learned over time was that the best results yielded with the first year students. Because no one's marketing to those guys and girls. They have years before they can even have a license. And if you're a typical PT owner, you're too desperate to want to pay attention to them. So getting in good with those universities early puts you in a position where they know, like, and trust you so that when they graduate, this guy Will, for example, has been with him since day one. They have so much depth before they even start looking. So guess who sets up the rotation at your company? Guess who is telling their friends and family, their friends at the university level, I'm already meeting and getting help from this individual at this company. So the biggest watering hole is the universities, and there's a million different ways to cut that pie. But without a doubt, if PTs would start really started treating universities like they treat their patients, really seeing their needs, wants, and fears and addressing them, no matter what that looked like, they would have a bench of A players definitely, because no one else is doing it.
Yeah, how would you address that question there, Brian? Where should some of the PT owners be looking that they're not looking right now? There's Indeed. There you can get on LinkedIn, and they have some good ad programs, and you can message people. What else maybe stands out to you nowadays?
You know, we have a lot of luck with LinkedIn. There's a few different options that are free as well as the paid version. You could even send requests to get connected to PTs. So even if you just have a free profile out there, you can still do some networking like that. Mm-hmm. So I think for the time, you know, we look at like the 80-20 rule, right? So in terms of like where you're going to invest your time, I would say LinkedIn is your best source for contacting PTs. Because you can view their profile, you can see, okay, this is an outpatient PT versus someone that's in skilled nursing or home health. And I think to Will's point as well, he's right about PTs that are, you know, younger in their careers are going to be more open, more flexible, more willing to explore. Because really, when we look at proactive recruitment, there's really kind of like two different phases to it. The first phase is, are you even open to consider a new position? So regardless of, you know, what might be out there, like, are you even open to talk? And once the person is open to talk, then, okay, great. We have this particular opportunity at our practice, and I'd love to share details with you. Are you open to chat with me about it? And so you really have to like have that two-tiered approach, I think. So it requires a little bit of, like, I would call it like drip marketing, where you're not just like sending out the job ad and, you know, you're kind of like going back and forth and having those communication, that dialogue with the person.
I'm really glad that you brought that up, because I fear that as we're telling people maybe they should spend some more time on LinkedIn, maybe they should look for social media, Facebook pages, if you will, where physical therapists live in the social media space, that they're simply going to post an ad, hey, we're looking for great physical therapists, and think that their job is done. And that's where they're going to stub their toes. Right. Where they have to, if you're really getting the crux of it, what Will's talking about, what Brian's talking about is, start developing relationships is what it sounds like. Don't start with, hey, I'm hiring. Do you want to join? No, it's more of like, hey, I want to get to know the physical therapists around me, and try to develop a relationship from there and see if they respond and start developing. I'm imagining, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like that's what you're talking about. Start developing some relationships.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, that's really where recruitment is. That's really where it happens, right? Because this person is not applying for your job. Like, they are not interested. They did not come to you. You know, they're just sitting there, you know, and you're contacting them. So we can't like contact someone who's a cold lead and expect them to just jump up and down and come forward. Like, we have to go back and forth and build that relationship and understand, you know, what's driving them, what's maybe uncomfortable or unsatisfying about their current position. And that's really where it becomes a challenge, I think, is because it's very time consuming. But on the flip side, you know, it kind of makes sense because, you know, you are interested, like you said, Nathan, in that individual person. And from the person's point of view, or from the PT's point of view, you know, they feel honored, like, oh my gosh, like this practice owner contacted me about their job, and I don't have to go onto their website. I don't have to enter the address of my high school into their online application. You know, I can just reply to the text message or reply to the message. And I mean, that's really powerful that, you know, the clinic owner would identify me as a possible candidate for their company. But in order to do that, you have to be willing to have those individual conversations. And yeah, most practice owners, they're just going to go on to the student Facebook group that has like 50,000 members on it and try and post their job ad.
They don't let you do that, unfortunately.
Right.
They'll kick up the quickest way to get booted.
That's right. So, you know, James, as you're hearing some of this, maybe go to some social media groups and whatnot. How does an owner stand out? I mean, how are they going to like stand out from the crowd? Maybe part of it is developing relationships, but what can you recommend maybe in a message or how we go about doing this that's going to make us stand out from the other owners out there?
Messaging. One thing I'm just going to say prior to that is we're talking about, I think we're not assuming anything, I guess, here, but there is a lot of work that has to be done, like Brian said, they have to do the work, like to build a relationship. That's work. You know, that's not, you can't be treating 60 hours a week and build relationships too easy. I mean, you're not going to do it, right? So let me just say that the way to get to even where we're talking about, and I think everyone knows this, but it's good to, I think, reiterate it, is you have to build in that time, the administrative time, recruitment time, or get yourself an admin or lead PT, or even I've used a technison.
Or hire a recruiter, one of which is on this.
Hire Brian. Well, but yeah, I mean, I would just, you know, from my side of getting the internal workings, you could definitely just have somebody do. They're not going to do everything for you, but they can post certain things online, and they can send you resumes, and they can respond in your name, and work on LinkedIn, and be the owner on LinkedIn, now that kind of stuff. Right. So you have to make the time, or I'm glad you
brought that up. No, thank you for saying that. I appreciate that. Yeah. But to go to the point, how do they stand out then in those situations?
I think I find that salesy messages don't go well, because PTs don't like sales. I mean, I don't know one physical therapist that likes to sell, even though they have a plan of care to sell. We won't talk about that, but yeah, they don't like to sell, you know. So, and I understand that it can almost cheapen the care, and I understand that. So I would not have it be a salesy piece, you know, like Will would certainly say. I would push the values of your practice, what they're going to get from being part of this amazing team. I would make darn sure that any review, any employer review sites have amazing reviews by your staff. You know, that's key, because I had people literally tell me, when I called them, why didn't you show up? Well, I saw the reviews. Like, oh my God, really? There was having me one bad review or something. So I think that's all the backbone of it, is not a very salesy piece, pushing values and integrity of your clinic, and the benefits to them, not just not just financially, but morally and ethical benefits and value benefits, right? And maybe some of that time off stuff, if that, maybe you're, a little bit more lenient on time with kids is okay, or end early some days a week, or flexibility, those words are fun. People like those words these days. But yeah, I would just make sure too that there is, you have the reviews also positive. That has to be a backbone there too, for sure.
Yeah, because I think it would be very short-sighted of owners to think that these people are gonna, if they're interested in us at all, that they're just gonna focus on our relationship and not Google us. Right.
Yeah.
Right. They're gonna Google our and see what our webpage says, and maybe are our purpose and values listed there? Are there good reviews? Are we getting 5-star reviews, not just from patients, but maybe from employees as well? So it's important to have some of that backbone structure to back you up, for sure. And so, Will, what would you say to this then? How is someone going to stand out as you're talking to some of these? I know you're talking to PTs as well as PT owners. What are some of the things they're looking for? Like if I were to say, what's the most common thing a PT is looking for that's been out of school between 1 to 5 years?
Yeah, good question. So it was a hard shift for me when you asked that question, because I'm so used to like, what are people looking for coming out of school? Out of school, it's always mentorship, number one.
Would you put that above like some kind of student loan repayment? Because I've actually
I put that above. They want their biggest fear. If you remember being a PT coming out of school, the biggest fear is that you have the imposter syndrome. You've gotten 3 years of education, you come out and they give you patients, and you're no more like, there's no like layer difference between you and the PT who's been out 20 years, who has amazing hands, and you're supposed to, it's like, so you kind of feel like you're faking it, but you kind of are. And so a strong mentorship program scratches that concern, that itch, if you will, of like, yeah, you're going to be okay. And you have someone to go to for questions, and they'll take that above the student loan, but student loan is number 2, the money driver for them. I'd say that's number 1 for people out a year. People within 7 months coming out of school, they stop. It's amazing. It's like, I just need mentorship. Education's all I care about. 6 months in, it's like, where's my raise? I'm doing fine. Like, they don't care much. They don't even want to do the program. We used to give at Rise Rehab, one of the things we did to attract new grads was we gave unlimited Con Ed. Remember that? Mm-hmm. Unlimited Con Ed. We'll pay whatever you want. Just go to courses. And they never went, because they don't really care as much as they think they do coming out of school. It's not that they don't care, but like this passion to be like certified in 7 different things isn't what happens. So anyway, the number 1 thing for any PT after that, hands down, student loans. But see, that's a complicated thing, because it's easy to say, well, you just need to put a student loan program together, but it's part of the whole package of like, how much are they making relative to how much they're seeing? This new generation coming up, thanks to the school systems, and that's sarcastic, are so hyper worried that they're going to abuse the system and be taken advantage of if they see more than 1 patient per hour. And it's not every school and it's not every student, but I've been in a lot of these discussions, and I read all that goes into those student Facebook groups. And it's like this constant flow of like, yeah, they're making me do this. And then there's people who are taking advantage of that online, who are saying, yeah, don't let these employers take advantage of you. You're worth 6 figures. And I'm like, have you run a PT business with the crappy margin? Have you seen that? I defy you to work anywhere else where they're not going to like have a better balance of these things, but these students are coming in. So when we talk about student loan, that might be the main, like, that's the sizzle, but that's not the steak. Like we sell sizzle, not the steak. So we'll sell them on that. But what they really want is to feel balanced, seen, and heard. So again, like, it's okay that your visit expectation per week is more than 1 visit per hour. You can create that and teach them. It's awesome to be more productive, right? Because production is the basis of morale. If they can feel, I'm not talking about being a mill, that's not what I'm saying, but there's a balance there, that when we get the loan repayment piece there and we develop this culture of having fun and being productive and changing patients' lives, they'll never go anywhere else. But they're gonna answer you, like you guys were saying beautifully, James and Brian. They're not gonna want to jump into marriage from an ad on social media, but they are gonna click if your ad has something to do with like, are you sick of the weight of student loans on your shoulders? we've got a solution that I'd love to share with you. Click. And maybe you give them something that has nothing to do with your company about coming over. Maybe it's something like, Bart McDonald's book, stress-free, or what's it called? Debt-free PT. Yeah, you link them to stuff, and then they remember you. They go, oh yeah, James was that guy that like showed me that connection. And then remember, it's the 5 touch rule, right? Like touch number 4 and 5, and you reach out. Then it's like, hey, you seem pretty awesome. I want to work with you, because if we compare recruiting to dating, which I do too much, even to the points where it gets inappropriate, I really get to the point where it's like, we all want to be desired, right? Like we want it too soon, scary. First ad, I want you. What the crap, dude? We just met. By the 5th time that we've been in the same communication cycle together, and I feel and like you, and I look up to you maybe because you've been this leader, then you go, dude, you're perfect for us. I got to talk to you. I know you're probably happy where you are, but can we just talk? Yeah. That's when we can take advantage of what our competitors aren't doing because they're too busy.
Brian, would you say that the people that are on the move, PTs that might be looking, are they the younger ones that are in this just out of school and on to 5 years in?
Well, yeah, I think most PTs that are finding jobs online
and
or just
and willing to and open to that.
Yeah, as you get more experienced in your career as a PT, I found that you're landing your next job based on like someone that you met at a conference or someone that from the community, or we see more experienced PTs finding their jobs more like organically through connections, where they're not online. Their friend owns a clinic and they decided to come and work for them. And so I think you get beyond like 15 years of experience, and there's very few PTs that are on the open job market with more than 15 years of experience. I think most PTs that are on like the open job market have 14 or less.
So you're going to want to focus your message then to the younger crowd, it sounds like Will's talking about.
Well, and I mean, most of our clients as well, when they're looking for a PT, like I've never had a clinic owner say, I want someone that has 15 years of experience. Like it never happens. Like most clinic owners say, I want someone that has 3 years of experience, or 2 to 5 years of experience. I've never had a clinic owner say that they want someone with more than 5 years of experience. Now, obviously, most PTs out there have more than 5 years of experience. So it's kind of a strange scenario, but I think when a clinic is looking for jobs and just the market of people searching, I think it is more of a younger crowd in terms of a newer therapist. So yeah, you could tailor your approach to someone, that's open, and also just people that are younger in their career, they do tend to be more open and flexible. Like I think Will said earlier, it's like they don't have like their routine figured out, or they haven't like found their super long-term employer yet. So we do see a lot of people that change jobs as well during that first third of their career.
Well, I think it's important to note that even if you're open to having someone who is more experienced, 5, 10, 15 years, the important thing is to have a dedicated avatar, if you will, a certain demographic, so that you can tailor your messaging, right? We always know that as we're directing our messaging to a certain group, we're going to be more successful, number one, with that group, but we're also going to inspire or intrigue other people just outside of that circle, right? So even though we're targeting our message to a certain demographic, I think it's important to note that there's strength in that, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think anytime that we're focused on the logistics of the job, that's always my recommendation to our clients is, think about what are the logistics of the job in terms of, the work schedule, the hours, the clinic location. And I encourage my clients to really focus in on those elements. And those are, evergreen, regardless of your experience level, those logistics of the position are always appropriate. I personally don't like to see ads that, are saying, do you want to work hard and be rewarded? And do you want to join a fast-paced clinic? Because I feel like most PTs, just want to make it to their kid's soccer game on time. They're not necessarily concerned about, being a rock star for someone else. Like, they're working to enjoy the rewards of that employment. Like, they don't actually want to join your team. Like, they don't want to work for you. They want to work to enjoy the rewards that working for you will provide. So it's not that they want to just work for you. Like, they're working for you to enjoy those rewards that they'll receive.
Thanks. Yeah, James, you said there's a few questions there on Facebook. Do you mind sharing them for me? Because I'm having some technical difficulties.
Of course, and another one just jumped on here. So the first one I don't fully understand. It mentions Brian's name. I didn't fully understand if that's a question or more of a comment. But
yeah, I think it was Pratik. He was just mentioning that I was encouraging him to speed up the process because we were losing candidates from a time perspective. So I was just encouraging him to keep the process as tight as you possibly can.
Definitely.
And then extending the job offer as soon as you feel comfortable that you have a candidate worth hiring.
That makes sense.
Yeah, this is something that Will talked about in our symposium a few weeks ago, that speed is vital.
Yeah.
Like, you can't keep someone on the line for a few days and not respond to their email, text, whatever message. You've got to be, within the day, you got to be responding and faster if possible.
So I'll read Emil's here, and I can comment on it, and then anybody else can chime in. I'm going to paraphrase Emil. So you have a great interview. The person matches your values and matches the personality you want. The skills are right there. The golden child, right? So you're good to go. And then, he slips. He doesn't slip. And he says, by the way, I'm going to be moving out of state in a year. Within a year, I'll be moving. What do you do with that? Well, I one of a few of you know this gentleman, but I worked for a very successful PT up north, and I was very impressed that he would not necessarily, he wouldn't look for people that didn't want to own their own practice or didn't want to be the boss. He looked for some people who wanted to own their own practice, and that's quite a spin, because you're like, but then he'll compete with me. She will compete with me. Maybe, I guess. But if it's all above board, right? And so, what are your ambitions? What's your purposes and goals here? Well, I'm going to move, and I would love to own. I mean, I'm from Kansas. I'd love to, one day own my own practice. Cool. Well, why don't we bang this out for a year here? Let's check out what we can pull off together, and then we'll talk about ownership together. Why not? Let's expand to Kansas, buddy. Like, that would. I mean, you'd have to do a lot of research and make sure that makes sense and all that. But I think that conceptually, being willing to look at somebody who has the ambitions to do that kind of thing. He didn't say ownership here, but if that was the case, then I would play ball. Again, if he's worth it and it matches everything else you want, and he might move. Now, if it's not, no, I don't want to own, I'm going to move. Yeah, different story. Then. Maybe there's a contract for a year. You don't give them certain benefits. Maybe CEUs or continuing ed is cut down or something. But if you need the work now, sign him up. Of course, don't waste him. He's good. He's a good candidate. But yeah.
Will, what would you say in that situation if this guy or girl checks all the boxes, and then they say, you know what? By the way, my significant other is getting transferred in a year. I don't know where I'm going, or maybe they do. It doesn't matter. What would you say to them?
So like role playing?
Well, just what is your thought? Like, if you had that,
I'm not going to. On board with James and I are, because we can role play. I've got some costumes.
Okay. Yes.
Get weird. I'm warning you now. The costumes get pretty awkward. But,
I'm sure.
No, I'm with James 100%. I would acknowledge the fact that they were really clear. I love the clarity. I love the idea of them coming up front and just saying, this is my situation. Now, obviously, there's other factors that we have to consider, like their previous experience. If they're brand new grads, and you're going to have to coach, you're going to have to like mentor them for 3 months. That may not be worth it if they're leaving in 10, but if they've been out 3 years, they've been proven in their previous work experience to be able to see a similar volume that you've done before, and you check their references, and they're willing to talk to you about it, and they can show you a pretty clear match, then yeah, that's a year of relief. And what you can always do in those cases is really build that out. I love runways like that. When people are that PT, to me, I want to hire them now. When I heard that, I read that message, because it's like, wow, that's a scary thing for them to bring up. And so if they're like, yeah, I'm going to be leaving in a year out of state, I mean, they're running the risk of not being hired by people who are small-minded. Yeah. So big thinkers and it still has to check those boxes, but if those boxes are checked and they're big thinkers, they can hire them, and that just gave them immediate relief. And now they've got this runway, and they can build it with this person to where, like, think about that. Like, they have an opportunity as an owner to be with this physical therapist in a way to where when they leave, they've just invested in this PR person who's going to go tell them all about the amazing experience they had their 1 year at your practice. And you're going to stay in touch with them on social media, and every time you can, you're going to ask them to send you a positive review. So it's a pretty awesome opportunity for sure. And I was actually hoping you were going to say, well, that's okay.
Well, I was thinking the same thing. Like, what a gift. If someone shared that with you, like, I'm going to be here for a year, you could say, awesome, that is great. You know, that gives me a year to find your replacement and allows you the opportunity to train your replacement instead of me. What an amazing gift that is to an owner, for someone to give them that kind of foresight and say, wow, okay, I'll use you for a year. We're on the same page. Let's kill it. And now you can do all these things that Brian is talking about, that Will's talking about, investing in new grads and the colleges, that maybe gives you some time to do some of that stuff that'll pay off further down the road. But yeah, it meets an immediate need, and you can also plan and give yourself that much more time to find your next great physical therapist, right?
Yeah.
Well, James, we've got more questions, so I don't want to.
There's one more that's kind of the opposite, which is good to kind of balance this. So, Sarah, I have had several candidates that join our team. They join us, so they sign up or they commit on paper, I guess. Or verbally. They like us, we like them. They bail on their first 3 days. In their first week, they're gone. They never show for their first day. We are bringing on people that indicate that they will mesh with us. They seem right with our values. And then any advice?
Are these physical therapists, Sarah? I wonder if she can answer that for us, because I don't think that's common, is it, Brian? That physical therapists jump off a few days into the job?
No, it's not common. I mean, most PTs, when they make a decision, you know, they're doing it somewhat scientifically and, you know, making that decision to the best of their ability. There's really no benefit to the PT to join somewhere and then leave right away. So there may be an opportunity to do like a job shadow or some kind of a realistic job preview. It sounds like, you know, the PT is showing up and they're seeing something at the practice that doesn't jive with them.
Totally.
So, you know, I would say do like a job shadow, at least for an hour, and, you know, really let the PT know, like, okay, here's what we have, you know, here's how many patients per hour, here's the documentation system, here's the dress code, here's the bathroom, you know, take a look at everything.
Yeah. How do you, especially coming from the HR side, since you're a professional at it, James, how do you avoid that kind of situation? What do you do prior to hire so that the person who is joining you isn't like, wait, this isn't what I signed up for?
You know, I luckily haven't, it's been a rare occurrence, especially with a PT, like we're saying, with a professional like that. Well, one thing I want to just acknowledge what Brian said is something happened. If they were truly sold, then they were unsold, obviously. And they saw something, heard something, read a review, were kicked in the butt on the way out. Something happened. You know, they saw something happen. So a job shadow is killer, of course. And that's one way to keep them there, just keep them there. And something else we've done, Nathan, to keep that, when that does happen, to keep it from happening again, is we call and we survey these people. You know, it's an odd call sometimes, because not all the time. Sometimes they're, oh yeah, something else came up and I'm moving, or another job. Fine, let me ask you something. what was the reason you didn't show up? Or was there anything that occurred while you were here that you thought was odd or that turned you off? Or you seem really interested when you came in. Did something change? I would be very overt and just be like, what's up? What happened? Because you need that data, because how are you going to correct if you don't know what you're doing? If they just willy-nilly go and you like, there's the fourth PT you lose in like 2 weeks. My God. I mean, number one, change was hiring people. I mean, I probably wouldn't do that because something's up, and or who's in the room with the hiring person, or who's at the front desk, because there's a gap there, right? So I would immediately change the route lines when they come in and send them to me. I don't want anyone talking to them, send them to me. And then I would, debug with interview why that's happening.
I think, unfortunately, if you're not doing a job shadow during the course of the hiring process, I think you're missing the boat, and a great opportunity for both sides to assess each other clearly. And I think also not laying out expectations ahead of time. So to not bring up what the productivity standards are in your clinic prior to hire, and then bring that up with them within the first couple of days after hire is a big mistake, because they might come into it thinking, well, I thought you cared about patients, when the meaning to that to me is that I see one patient an hour, and you're telling me that you book on the half hour. Well, you obviously don't care about patients. That conversation should have happened well before hiring, right? And down to how many patients you see an hour, what your billing processes are, what your dress code is. I mean, all those things shouldn't be happening after the fact, right? What would you say to that, Will?
Yeah, you can tell I want to say something. I'm like leaning in.
Yeah, you lean forward.
Like super intense. I want to talk to Sarah. Sarah, first of all, we feel your pain. Been there, sucks, man. Like that's just the worst. When you think you've got it resolved, you've gone through that whole process, and then they bail. So the other thing I'd want you to know is that it's not always a reflection on you either. All these, and this is because these wonderful gentlemen have already said so many powerful things about it. Sometimes because you're doing the right things, they'll do what they do. So you have to remember, companies like Google that spend more money in their recruiting and retention programs than any other company in the world, they only get it right 60 to 70% of the time. That means they have a churn rate of 30 to 35% of who they hire or who they think would be a good fit for them. And so, especially if you're dealing with non-PT positions, and these are more transitional in nature, it is something that's going to happen as part of the game, and it can be a blessing. Like if people come in and they're gone in a week because, you know what, maybe they oversold themselves, or maybe they came in from a place of like, these people who aren't even showing up on their first day, huge blessing. Yeah. Like whenever you could do an average job recruiting, and if they just no-show, I don't think that's your fault. That's a complete integrity issue on that person's end. And you can count it as like a frustrating thank you and then move on. The only thing I would add is that in those early interviews is to really train people on how to end the relationship. So one of the things I have found to be very successful in my journey is to interview in like the second interview. You don't do it on the first one, but like before they come on, maybe they've done the working interview. I just have a conversation of like, all right, so we're really excited about it. I'm going to send you a job offer, but listen, I want to talk about what it's going to look like when you're not working for us down the road. And what I mean by that is my job is to help you find your next job, wherever that is. I hope it's with me, but my job is to serve you to grow. That's the ultimate reason we're together. So if you're ever in a place where this isn't going to work, and like in your first week, you might be shocked, because as much as we're trying to be transparent, the reality of it might be different. I just want you to come talk to me. There's nothing wrong with being afraid or feeling overwhelmed. I just want you to tell me about it. And I can promise you that we're going to do the same with you if anything comes up early. And so that's why we ask for a 4-week notice, not a 2-week, but a 4-week, because we have a different relationship here at our company. We're going to be so committed to you that like normal companies, it doesn't start working out. And so things end within 2 weeks, and it's kind of weird. We want to be a part of your next journey. So we're going to help you, but we just need time to do that and replace you. So let us know early. If you're going to talk to anyone about concerns, it's not any of the other employees, because that's not allowed here. You only talk to your direct report or me if you're getting to a place where you're not sure if this is a fit, and we will absolutely support you. So that kind of language early does help. But even with that, 30% of the time, it's going to happen. And it's not always.
That's right. Did Sarah add any more to the question there, James, or was there simply another question that we can address?
No, she said, I said to these PTs, yeah, it's crazy. It happened since COVID. She explained that. And then she said, thank you. It's definitely not a productivity issue. We are very clear about expectations, but the job shadow idea and growing mentoring is great. Thanks. So that was the comment.
Yeah, thanks. Any other questions after hers?
No, sir.
Okay. Well, one thing that was really successful for us in the past, Will and Brian, you can chime in on this as well, was we did a lot of emails, right, to the licensed physical therapists in the state. We haven't addressed that today. Is that something that you would still recommend? And Brian, I don't know if you're doing that as well, but maybe you guys can chime into doing some drip campaigns to recruit physical therapists.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the emails are great. Some of the states, they give you the email address. So that's always, awesome when you get the emails. Otherwise, you could do research using like whitepages.com or other online sources to obtain the emails. You can also purchase lists with email addresses on it. It's a little bit tricky, I guess, because you don't have permission from the PT to email them. So there's some consideration among that. Are you spamming them by emailing them about your job? I don't know. We look at it as like one-to-one communication. So when we do emails, we have it all merged in, and we're sending them in large groups, but the emails are coming across as like one-to-one communication.
Gotcha.
And then we also do a lot of manual research of email addresses as well, because we get a lot of work emails. So we try and avoid sending to work emails when possible. Otherwise, you can do some texting as well, or some calling. You mostly have to research those phone numbers, but that can be a great way as well. And typically we see about half of our candidates that come through like the proactive side. So like email blasts, cold calling, texting. But all of that is somewhat challenging to administer. But then also once you get the system set up to do the process, you have to be available to answer the texts and talk to the people on the phone and respond to the emails. And again, that speed is important. So it definitely works, but there's certainly some considerations around it.
Yeah, definitely time intensive as well, what you're describing. Will, what did you find as you did the email marketing that seemed to be successful or help, or did you find much success yourself?
Yeah, we did. We had, it was a great secondary thing. I remember it wasn't our main channel for finding leads, but it was way better than like an Indeed ad. And what was cool about that process too, is that we would send out an email roughly every 6 weeks, every 3 to 6 weeks, because, we're already being bombarded with different emails, but the 3 to 6 week thing was the range that we would do. And it wasn't always like recruiting based. It would, like, if we had a holiday party, we'd take a picture of it, just be like, Rise Rehab celebrates the end of this year with the most amazing team on earth. Hope you guys have a happy holidays. And, so we try to create value in that, but every 3rd to 4th email that would go out would be like, hey, my name is Will Humphreys. I hope you're happy where you are. But if you're wondering if the grass is greener, give me a call, because we have something really special going on over here. And that would generate a handful of leads every time, just a couple of people to talk to. And over time, it was like there was these highs and lows where sometimes it wasn't really generating a lot of leads, but I never let it go because that's how we were coached. And this one time I was talking to somebody who I met for the first time, and he was like this remote area of Arizona, nowhere near our company. And I remember talking to him, he's like, oh, you're from Rise Rehab? Dude, that's a company. He didn't know that was me saying the emails. He didn't remember my name. He's like, that's a company I've always wondered if it'd be cool to work for. What's it like working for them? I'm like, well, actually, it's me and my partner, Nathan. But he was like, yeah, because I don't want to go down to the Phoenix area, but like, I get these emails and I just keep thinking that looks like a cool company. And I thought, oh, there's the magic.
Yeah.
Going back to that, recruiting being a relationship development to marriage. That's what it is. It's a lot of like, I don't know, good PR, I guess is a good way of putting it, to where they start to have a feeling for your brand. They see that logo. I think it's a powerful tool. I think it's one that's a secondary. I wouldn't make it the primary focus, but if you don't have a lot of time, that might be better than doing an Indeed ad.
Yeah. You know, James, you were the one that instigated or thought up this idea of doing a roundtable. What was it that we covered a ton of stuff. The what was one thing that you would want to say to this audience now that we're here about recruiting that that people need to know, or that you would want to share from your experience?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think a couple of the key points I mentioned was just to make time for it. I mean, you have to make time for it. I think that I can say that 35 times a minute, because even myself, there's things that I don't get done, I don't make time for it. So especially with these, hands all in owners, you have to make time for it, or get an external company to do it for you, or get somebody internal with a quick training or hat to like do it for you, or something, do parts of it for you. I think with what's coming up with PT assistants, let's talk about current events a little bit. So physical therapy assistants, there's bound to be, I mean, you can look at that a few different ways, of course, right? The billables and how that's going to affect the PT industry as a whole. But there will likely be a bunch of PT assistants out there looking for work, I would imagine, come now-ish. And if you can make that work in your model, depending on your insurance mix and so on, let's be honest, if you need some work, and you need some hourly work, maybe that's not going to handle a PT's load. And well, some cases that's not true. Some of them can. I've seen that.
Do. Yeah, for sure.
But anyway, I would keep an eye on that. Keep an eye on PT assistants. Maybe tweak the ad a little bit, give it a shot, and see what comes in. Because as you know, things are going to change in, I think, January 1st, was it?
Yeah.
So that's just a quick little current tip. But make time for things and keep in communication. One thing to add to Will and Brian's last point is I make sure to keep in touch with my former applicants. Now that's not a frequent thing. People don't always do that. It's like, but applicants that weren't hired. Some applicants that were hired and didn't make it, depending on how it went down. But I would put them on that email list. I put them on my little how's it going? Open house, come on back. How you been? I keep them there because they had interest, right? They were a little hotter than the guy who you've never spoken to, right? So a couple tidbits.
Yeah, it definitely takes the time. And when, for those people who don't think they have the time, I would just encourage you to think about what could another physical therapist do for you as an owner outside of the productivity that they could provide for your clinic. Like if you look at it further down the road, another physical therapist could possibly allow you to offload your schedule to find more people, find better people, generate policy and procedures. Maybe you're scared to hire somebody because you don't know if you'll be able to fill their schedule. Well, if they offloaded you a little bit, but now you have more time for marketing. There are so many opportunities that you could take with that time, bringing on another physical therapist. And so then maybe the idea of marketing and putting more time into recruiting for a physical therapist can take a little bit higher priority on your list of to-dos. And also remember, there's a magic number there in most outpatient orthopedic clinics. If you're somewhere between, I'd say 1,500 to 3,000 square feet, maybe a little bit more. But if you can get to that 4 or 5 physical therapist mark, that's pretty productive. There's a magic sweet spot of profit margin that you don't get when you only have 2, maybe 3 physical therapists on staff. And if you're looking at growth and expansion and your goal is to get to 4 to 5 physical therapists, then maybe that's an incentive to set aside some more time during the week to recruiting for physical therapists, right? Were there any more questions there, James?
No, sir. We've got them all.
We covered them all. All right.
Yep.
Cool. Awesome. Well, James, thanks for instigating it. I want to give Brian and Will a last chance to speak their mind as to any other things physical therapy owners should know about recruiting. Brian, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think James made a lot of great points there. It doesn't have to be you that does the recruiting. Your time is very valuable and it's limited, obviously. So if you have another person on your team that can do some recruitment activity, it'll still work. You're still going out and you're planting seeds, and it's not really rocket science. You just kind of delegate that and have the assistant or someone else on your team handle that. But it does need to be like we've all been saying, it does need to be something that you're available to do, or that person that you delegate to is available for. Because when those inquiries do come in, again, we need to jump on them right away. I guess just the other tip, or, just to reinforce, it's really like that mindset shift that we need to have right now, where we're not seeing PTs that are applying for jobs. There's still PTs that are out there that are, willing to look at positions, but we need to really approach them and be, vulnerable, trying to figure out, if we have what they want. So if logistically, if it makes sense for the person to come and join us, really kind of having those conversations proactively.
Yeah, well, Will, what do you have to say to the audience?
Yeah, when you asked that, it made me really reflect a little bit. And I just wanted to remind, for those of you who are taking time out of your day to listen to this and doing other things to improve your practice, I want to remind you how wonderful you are. Physical therapy owners are the ones who make it possible for PTs to be with their patients and to change these millions of lives every day across our country. And you're taking on an additional burden. And yeah, there's some upside potentially around that, but there's definitely the downside. And so I just want to remind you of your power and how influential and how important you are, because it doesn't always feel rewarding, does it? And what I would tell you is that if we stay fixated on that feeling of invalidation that occurs when people leave us or quit or don't show, then we're missing out on what's possible as leaders in our community. Your mindset is the only thing you need to fix. There's no, apart from everything that we've shared today, which is very valuable. Like, I love what Brian said about the mindset. If you know that you're powerful, if you know that you have something to offer people, which you do, then you're going to start showing up like that, and people will start being more attracted to it. And if you catch yourself using words like, yeah, it's just hard to recruit in this rural area, or who would want to come work for an owner, ... then you're absolutely going to get what you expect. And so it's so important just to validate you and recognize how much all of us appreciate you, and all the patients who don't even know you, how grateful they must be if they had known your efforts to help them get the care they need. So yeah, I think apart from that, Nathan, the only other thing I would say if you're a PT owner is, and I get nothing out of this, apart from working with Brian, and you got to meet James. James, he would be more than willing to take a call from you. This guy is amazing, one of the best leaders I know. And if you want to know where to start, just in general, it starts with a strategic plan. Get with Nathan. Nathan would never promote himself, so that's why I'm doing it. He's done a strategic plan for clients of mine in the black that, I kid you not, I've heard quotes that it has changed their lives. It's a one-day strategic plan that gives you focus, and it can incorporate recruiting as well as the many other aspects. So yeah, I'm sure I'm making him feel uncomfortable, but it is what it is, man. Like, that's what you and I did for 15 years. That's how we got where we're going. So that's where they should start. If they don't know where to start with you. And then from there, you can guide them to other wonderful people.
Agreed.
No, I really appreciate that. Hey, guys, thanks for the plug, Will. I appreciate that. Brian, if they wanted to get in touch with you as a recruiter full-time, how do they do that?
Yeah, sure. Our website is CareerTreeNetwork.com. And if you send an inquiry out there, we'll respond right away.
Cool. Good. As you should, because you're a recruiter, right?
Right.
Yeah, good. And then James, you do all things HR related. If people have more than just recruiting, if they have HR issues and questions, how do they reach and get in touch with you?
Just an email. It's probably the easiest way. Savas. So I got a J on both sides of my last name. jsavasj@gmail.com.
All right, great. And Will, tell us a little bit about how they can get in touch with you and why someone would want to get in touch with you, because you're not completely focused on recruiting right now, right?
No, it's part of this bigger master plan that I have to change the world. But for now, let me just say this. If you're interested in learning anything that I do, just hit me up on LinkedIn. Let's make it really simple. Hit me up on LinkedIn. I've got 3 different things that I'm doing now that could really help any private practitioner. So if you just want to say hi, if you're listening to this, hit me up on LinkedIn, Will Humphreys. I've got this. You won't miss it. It's got my ugly mug all over my
Cool.
profile. And just say, hey man, I heard you on the podcast. I'll send you over some free information on things that I'm doing. And either way, I just want to be in your network. So hit me up.
All right. Well, cool. I'm gonna stop the recording for those who are listening on the podcast. If you guys want to hang out a little bit and just shoot the breeze here on Facebook for a few more minutes, we can do that as well. So otherwise, thank you guys so much for joining the podcast today.
Thank you, Nathan. That was awesome.
Thank you.
That's great.